The city never truly slept. Even at dawn, when the sky was still undecided between night and morning, the streets below the Malik Tower hummed with distant engines, murmured voices, and the restless movement of millions chasing something: money, survival, meaning. But high above it all, on the topmost floor of the tallest tower, there existed a silence so dense it felt deliberate. This was the home of Arslan Malik. A man whose name alone could make boardrooms go quiet. A man who had built an empire from nothing but sharp instincts and ruthless discipline. A man who owned factories, banks, ports, and people's loyalties. From the outside, his life appeared flawless. From the inside, it was unraveling. The room prepared for the newborn was perfect in every measurable way. Italian marble floors warmed by hidden heating. Walls painted in calming shades recommended by child psychologists flown in from Europe. A crib handcrafted from imported oak, fitted with a mattress that cost more than most people's annual salary. Nothing had been left to chance. And yet, something was terribly wrong. The doctors stood in a line near the window, their expressions carefully neutral, trained professionalism masking discomfort. Machines hummed softly behind them, blinking lights reflecting off glass surfaces. Arslan Malik stood across from them, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "Say it again," he demanded. His voice was steady, but the air around him vibrated with restrained fury. The senior specialist cleared his throat. "Mr. Malik, your son has been diagnosed with congenital bilateral sensorineural hearing loss." Silence followed. Arslan stared at the man as if he had spoken a foreign language. "I didn't ask for medical poetry," Arslan said. "I asked for clarity." The doctor hesitated. "Your son was born deaf." Completely. The words landed without sound, yet they echoed violently inside Arslan's chest. Deaf. The word felt obscene. Incompatible. Impossible. Arslan Malik did not produce weaknesses. His factories did not fail. His deals did not collapse. His bloodline did not carry defects. "You're wrong," Arslan said flatly. "Run the tests again." "We already have, sir. Multiple times." "Then run them again." The doctors exchanged glances. They had faced denial before, but rarely from a man like this. "There are advanced treatments," one of them offered carefully. "Therapies, cochlear implants. I don't care what it costs," Arslan cut in. "Fix it." The room fell quiet. The doctor spoke softly now. "Some things cannot be fixed. Only managed." Arslan turned away, staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. From this height, the world looked small. Obedient. Conquered. Yet for the first time in decades, he felt something unfamiliar tightening around his heart. Helplessness. Ayan Malik entered the world wrapped not in sound, but in silence. He did not startle at noise. Did not react to clapping hands. Did not turn his head at his mother's voice. His cries filled the room, but never responded to it. As weeks passed, then months, Arslan spared no expense. Specialists from Germany, neurosurgeons from Japan, private laboratories conducting experimental scans. Each consultation ended the same way, with polite regret and clinical certainty. Permanent, irreversible, non-responsive. Arslan listened to them all with a rigid face, nodding occasionally, dismissing them with curt gestures. Inside, something was breaking. Ayan's mother tried to remain hopeful. She held her son close, sang to him even when he didn't respond, pressed her lips to his tiny ears as if love itself could vibrate through bone and nerve. But she watched Arslan change. The man who once spoke confidently now avoided conversation. The father who should have cradled his child, instead watched from a distance. And then, quietly, almost unnoticed, she began to fade. Grief works differently on different people. Some shout, some weep, some simply disappear. She passed away less than a year later, officially due to complications. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. Silence had taken her too. Years passed. Ayan grew into a beautiful child, wide-eyed, curious, full of unspoken questions. He learned early to read faces instead of voices. To watch lips instead of listening for words. To feel vibrations through the floor, the walls, the furniture. He laughed freely, cried openly, loved without restraint. Yet the world remained locked behind an invisible wall. Arslan observed his son from afar. He attended meetings, closed billion-dollar deals, expanded his empire across borders, but at home, he was a stranger. Sometimes, late at night, he would stand outside Ayhan's playroom, watching his son stack blocks or draw shapes on the floor. He wanted to enter. He never did. What do you say to a child who cannot hear? And worse, what do you say to a child when your own heart is full of words you cannot speak? The staff moved silently around the mansion, careful not to disturb either the child or the father. Among them was Zainab. She was not young, nor old, not loud, nor invisible. She had been hired without much thought, recommended by another household, her resume unremarkable. Yet from the very first day, she noticed things others didn't. She noticed how Ayhan flinched at sudden movements but not sounds. How he pressed his hand against speakers when music played. How his eyes searched faces desperately, as if asking questions no one answered. Most of all, she noticed the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something unspoken. Zainab began spending more time with Ayhan. She communicated through gestures, expressions, gentle touch. She invented games that relied on rhythm felt through clapping on the floor. She held him when he cried, rocking him slowly, humming even though she knew he couldn't hear. But she hummed anyway, because she believed sound was more than noise. Sometimes, she leaned close to his ear and whispered stories. Stories of birds that navigated without sight. Of rivers that spoke without words. Of children who listened with their hearts. She did not know why she did it. She only knew she had to. One afternoon, Arslan noticed her. He stood in the doorway, unnoticed, watching Zainab sit on the floor with Ayhan. She was tapping gently on the ground in a steady rhythm. Ayhan's eyes followed her movements, his body swaying slightly, instinctively responding. Arslan frowned. "What are you doing?" he asked sharply. Zainab looked up, startled, then lowered her gaze. "Playing, sir." "He can't hear," Arslan said coldly. "There's no point." Zainab hesitated. Then, against every instinct of self-preservation, she spoke. "Sir, not all hearing is done with ears." The words hung in the air. Arslan stared at her, anger flashing across his face. "Do not fill my house with false hope," he said. "Hope is dangerous." Zainab bowed her head. "Yes, sir." But that night, as Arslan lay awake in his vast, empty bedroom, her words returned to him. Not all hearing is done with ears. He dismissed the thought. And yet, sleep did not come. Ayhan pressed his hand against the glass window, watching the city lights flicker below. He did not know their names. He did not hear their sounds. But he felt them, the vibrations of life, the pulse of something larger than himself. Behind him, unseen, two adults stood at opposite ends of the room. A father drowning in silence. And a maid carrying a belief she had not yet revealed. And somewhere between them stood a child. The heir to an empire of soundless nights. Unaware that, the silence surrounding him, was about to be challenged. By a single, unexpected step. End of chapter 1. The night arrived without warning. Not with thunder or rain, not with sirens or chaos. But with a quiet urgency that crept through the Malik Tower like a shadow. Ayhan had been restless all evening. Zainab noticed it first. Children like Ayhan lived in heightened awareness. Without sound, every sensation arrived louder: light, touch, temperature, emotion. That night, his body refused rest. His fingers trembled slightly. His breathing was shallow. His forehead burned beneath her palm. She called for the nurse. By the time the thermometer confirmed what Zainab already knew, the fever had crossed into dangerous territory. Doctors were summoned. Private elevators descended and rose again. Machines were wheeled in. Arslan Malik arrived last. He always did. Still in his tailored suit, phone pressed to his ear, he dismissed a board member mid-sentence the moment he saw his son's condition. The device slipped into his pocket, forgotten. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice controlled, but brittle. "High-grade fever," the doctor replied. "Possible neurological stress." The words struck deeper than intended. Neurological. Arslan's jaw tightened. "Treat it." "We are," the doctor said gently. "But his condition complicates." Everything complicates, Arslan snapped. Just don't let him die. The room fell silent. No one responded, because no one could promise that. Ion lay on the bed, eyes half open, his small body trembling under layers of expensive blankets. His cries were hoarse, broken, not loud, but desperate. Zainab stood near the doorway, hands clenched into fists. She had seen sickness before. She had seen death. But this was different. This child had not even been allowed to hear the world before it tried to take him away. As the doctors adjusted drips and murmured clinical phrases, Zainab felt something stir inside her, an urgency she could no longer silence. She turned, and walked away. Zainab's room was small, tucked away on a lower floor of the tower. It held little more than a bed, a prayer mat, and a wooden trunk that had traveled with her for decades. Her hands shook as she knelt before it. She hesitated. She had sworn never to open it again. Some things were meant to remain buried, not because they were dangerous, but because hope could be cruel. But tonight, cruelty had already arrived. She opened the trunk. Inside, wrapped carefully in faded cloth, lay a small metal object, dull with age, worn smooth by time. A whistle, not decorative, not musical, purposeful. Her father's hands flashed through her memory, calloused, gentle, precise. A man who had believed that sound was not merely heard, but felt. A man no one had listened to. Not yet, he had told her once. The world isn't ready. Zainab closed her eyes. But maybe this child is. She wrapped the whistle again and stood. This time, she did not hesitate. When Zainab returned to the room, Arslan noticed her immediately. Perhaps because desperation sharpens perception. What is that? He demanded, his eyes narrowing at the cloth in her hands. Zainab stopped a few feet from the bed. Sir, she said softly, please, allow me one moment. Arslan laughed once, short, bitter. Are we trying prayers now? Or magic? Neither, she replied. Truth. The doctors shifted uncomfortably. Arslan's voice hardened. This is not the time for superstition. Zainab met his gaze. For the first time since she had entered this house, she did not lower her eyes. My father dedicated his life to children like your son, she said. Children born into silence. Arslan stared at her. You're a maid, he said flatly. Not a scientist. No, she agreed. I am a witness. She stepped closer. Arslan raised a hand. If this is another false hope, then punish me, she said quietly. Fire me. Throw me out. Do whatever you wish. She swallowed. But if there is even a chance, one breath of possibility, would you deny your son that? Arslan froze. The room held its breath. Finally, slowly, he lowered his hand. One moment, he said. That's all. Zainab nodded. She unwrapped the cloth. The whistle caught the light, unremarkable, almost disappointing. Arslan felt anger rise in his chest. This is what she brought. Zainab knelt beside the bed. She did not touch Ion at first. She waited. She watched his chest rise and fall, felt the rhythm of his struggle. Then, carefully, she brought the whistle near his ear, not inside it, not touching skin. And she blew. Not hard, not loud. The sound that emerged was barely audible, thin, trembling. But what followed was not sound. It was vibration. The air itself seemed to shift. Ion's body jerked. Just slightly. Zainab froze. Arslan leaned forward, heart pounding. The whistle vibrated again. Ion's crying faltered. His fingers twitched. The machines beeped steadily, no alarms. Zainab blew again, longer this time. Ion's eyes opened fully, and then, he turned his head. Not randomly, not instinctively. He turned toward her. Arslan staggered back. That's not, he whispered. That's not possible. Zainab's hands trembled now. She blew the whistle again. Ion's lips parted. A soundless laugh escaped him, but his eyes shone with recognition. He was responding, not imagining, responding. Arslan collapsed into the chair behind him. Tears spilled freely, violent, unrestrained. For the first time since his son's birth, something inside him shattered completely. How? He breathed. How did no one find this? Zainab lowered the whistle. Because they were listening for sound, she said. Not feeling for it. The doctors were stunned. Tests were run. Scans repeated. Observations documented. The verdict was cautious, but undeniable. Ion's auditory nerves were not dead. Dormant. Untouched. Waiting. What followed was not a miracle overnight. It was work. Painful therapy. Specialized vibration treatments. Long hours. Slow progress. Arslan attended every session. He sat on the floor now. Clapped on surfaces so his son could feel rhythm. Learned gestures. Learned patience. Power no longer mattered. Presence did. Zainab remained quietly in the background. She never took credit. She never spoke of her father again. But sometimes, late at night, Arslan would see her watching Ion from the doorway. Tears in her eyes. A smile on her face. One evening, Arslan stopped her. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" he asked. She looked at the whistle in her hands. "Because hope," she said, "should be offered carefully. It can save, or destroy." Arslan nodded. "I was afraid of hope," he admitted. She met his gaze. And now, he looked at his son, laughing silently, yet alive with sensation. "Now," he said, "I'm afraid of silence." Months later, Ion stood barefoot on the floor, eyes closed. Zainab tapped softly. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ion smiled. And turned. Not toward her. Toward the vibration. Toward the world. Arslan watched from the doorway. The most powerful man in the city. Humbled. Broken. Rebuilt. By a child who taught him that some steps do not echo with sound. But they change everything.